Morning, everybody. Mr. Jamnik here. Hope everyone's doing well on this lovely morning. Um, we're going to be getting into Module 11, which also Module 10, 11, they all kind of mesh together with equations, expressions. We went from starting with, taking math terms like addition, increase, decrease, multiply by, quotient, and then you applied that to equations, or you substituted. Does everyone remember what these are called? One, two, variables. Very good. And then you're taking a number and substituting for the variable, and then you're solving that equation, and then you're just continuing to move along. So now we're starting with adding and subtracting equations. So with types of equations, we're only focusing right now on adding and subtracting. And the main thing of when you're adding and subtracting equations is that you're always going to be giving two whole numbers. In this case, you have 10 and 15, you have 8 and 20. You're always given the operation, so we're going to start with addition, and then we'll move to subtracting, and then you have your two variables. And this is just an extension and really starting to understand the components. You always have to solve and figure out what you want to get. In this case, you need to solve. You may be able to look at some of these problems in mental math and know, but the main thing is showing the process to understand why you're getting that. You can get a number out of the air and say, oh, I know what that is, and I know you're adding this or whatever, but you really have to show the different steps in the process. That's the whole thought with a mathematical procedure, is to understand when you're writing and solving equations for any kind of operation. So I'm going to show you guys what you need to start. The main thing is, again, you're focusing on getting the variable by itself. Right now, a plus 10 are the equation. A is not by itself. You want to get that eliminated so you can figure out what number it needs to be in place of that. You're not given that number. You're told that A is the variable. You're using an operation of addition. Then the whole number is 10, and then the answer has to equal the number 15. So this is where you have to go back and double check your process. So when we think about inverse operations, just like we did with fractions at the beginning of the year, inverse means what? Right? Inverse means that it's opposite. So if we're doing opposite, we're not touching what the opposite of equals 15. That is the answer. We know that it has to equal 15. We're looking at what's in front of the whole number 10. And in this case, what's in front of it? It's an addition sign. Okay, you're not touching the variable yet. That's going to come in the process. And you keep following this procedure for addition and subtraction. It just changes when you get to the end part. So you're looking at the addition sign and 10. Okay, so again, you're looking at the inverse, okay, which is the opposite. So what's the opposite of positive 10? Is what? Very good. Is a negative 10. And we can't just leave it like this because again, we're thinking about how we need to find the variable that's going to equal a, to give us the true form of the equation, to let us know what the answer is, to give us 15. So what we do to one side, we have to do the other side. It's just the way the flow of the equation goes. So equal stays the same, minus 10. Then we put the line underneath. Now you're seeing the process that's formed when you're going to figure out the different steps. So step one is just giving you the actual problem. A plus 10 equals 15. Then I'm telling you guys the inverse, and I'm putting up here just to show you, is the opposite, right? When you do the opposite, you're taking the opposite of the number with the variable, and you're doing it to both sides. You're never touching the number next to the equal sign, because that's the answer that's given. That can't change. That has to be understood. So watch the procedure that I'm doing. The A comes down, okay? Now when you have 10 minus 10, it's 0. You don't need to bring the 0 down. The main understanding is when you have this number, you can just cross these two out. They cross each other out. They're 0. And you have to follow along. So after we bring down the A, you're going to bring down the equal sign, okay? And then you're following along from as a regular math, but make sure that operation's there. You know you converted the addition to subtracting, so you did subtract one side, subtract the other. Has to be the same. So bring down the variable A. The 10 minus 10 cancels out. You do not need to bring down the 0 because that's what's going to happen in all the equations. Bring down the equal sign, and then as you're reading the equation, what's 15 minus 10? Answer should be 5. And that's it. Then you're going to be asked to show, well, okay, we're backwards. apply what you just did and put that in the form of the variable to show me the true equation. So we know now we just figured out together. A equals what? It equals 5. So we're substituting now. So 5 plus 10 gives us 15. So this is the true equation. And we know that we're correct because you did the process of adding and subtracting the equation based on the inverse operation. So a plus 10 equals 15. Variable a stays the same. And the variable is always going to change. A, y, x. The letters are always different. Whatever the operation is, you do the inverse to both sides. The number that remains the same cancels out. And then you follow the procedure for the second operation. So let's follow along. I'm going to leave a couple pauses in here as I do this one to see if you guys can follow along. So we got y minus 8 equals 20. So think about this now. We're looking at what number does not get touched. And the answer should be, very good, the 20 does not get touched. Why? Because that's the answer that's given to us. We know that it equals 20. We're not touching that. Our main problem for this is we need to find what the variable of y would equal to make this equation true to what? To equal 20. That's the main process. So just like you did here, what do we do next? We don't touch the y because we don't know the y. Okay? We're looking at the operation and the number. Okay? What's the operation? Is subtracting. Just like we have to focus up here, what's the inverse of subtracting? Addition, opposite. So we're doing plus 8, and then we do plus 8. Draw the line. Look at the steps. Make sure everything applies the same. Did you do the addition plus 8 to both sides? If you did, awesome job. You want to keep it consistent. Once you do that, follow along in the example. Y, the variable, can bring down, right? Told you guys it's not necessary. If we have an 8, you're following as it goes. So it's an 8 plus y. Don't forget, some people say, well, the minus is still here. It's there in the beginning of the equation. We did the opposite. So you're really doing, these cancel out. So we do plus 8, just like you see here is, 10, these cancel out. We bring down the equal sign. Okay? Now, what is 20 plus 8? Should be what? Very good. 28. Okay? Now we have, just like we did here, you want to rewrite the problem, the equation, to show that what we did is true statement. So we're taking the 28, which is understood as the variable. 28 minus the original 8 should equal what? 20. And that's how we're doing these problems. So the main thing is, you may be able to look at these two and say, oh, mental math, I know. That's great. You should be able to do some of these mental math. But as you're doing that, you still have to show the process that you're doing from the inverse, from the addition to the subtracting, and from the subtraction to the addition. And it always applies the same when you guys are doing the word problems. You got to think about how it's written. And you're going to see some of those open-ended problems as we move along later in the week. But the main thing with adding and subtracting equations is doing the inverse of the operation that you see, and then continuing to do the process and then rewrite it so you know that the statement's true. Just to double check. So we know that 5 plus 10 equals the original answer of 15. Awesome job. We know that 28 minus 8 gives us 20. The original number is 20. Awesome job. So keep thinking about that as we're working. And what I'm going to do right now is, just bear with me. It gets a little hard. I want to erase this. I'm going to give you guys 2 more problems. And I'll work the steps, and then we're going to move along later in the week with multiplication and division as well. Same concept. Opposite of multiplication is division. Opposite of division is multiplication. Okay, so let's look at these two. We got A minus, let's do 10 equals 50. Okay, so A minus 10 equals 50. I know, again, I'm thinking about the process, thinking about the standard that applies, that we need to find the inverse with the adding and subtracting. So I'm just going to go over. I'm going to pause, make sure that you say it with me to help you understand. And then obviously the problems you're going to do are all based on this. So what number don't you touch? Good. 50. Why the 50? Because that's given to us. That's telling us that an answer has to equal 50. Okay? Then from there, we got variable minus 10. So I'm looking at the variable. I know we don't touch that yet because I don't know what that is. And I know we need to look at the subtraction and the 10. I need to think about, okay, what's the inverse? Inverse of subtraction is addition. So we do plus 10, we do plus 10. Make sure what you do to one side, you do to the other side. It has to be like that so you understand the concept of how it goes from the inverse to figure out what is the actual number that equals A. Okay? So we know that we bring down the variable. These can cancel out. Bring down the equal sign. And then just do the problem as it is and make sure you're following along. What is 50 plus 10? It is 60. Very good. So now I'm looking, okay, let me make sure that I did my problems right. We did the inverse of negative 10, subtracting 10. We got plus 10, plus 10. We canceled out. So now we're substituting. We got 60 minus 10 equals 50. Is that correct? Yes. Awesome job. And that's the way you apply when you're doing inverse to one side. Again, don't touch the number that's given that's telling you what the answer is. We know that the answer is 50. We're not touching that number. You can clearly see that we're waiting until we do the final step to get the answer to apply it to the variable. Okay? And let's just look at the last one. I'm going to give you, we'll do x plus 20 equals 30. Okay? So take a look at this one. Again, you're thinking about the concept, the operation, the variable, the process. Again, you can look at some of these and know mental math and be like, oh, I know what it is. Great. But you're always going to be asked to explain and justify what you're doing. And when you're doing that, you have to look at the whole procedure. So again, I know that the 30 is the given answer. We can't touch that. That's what we need to find the variable to understand what is giving us the answer of 30. So we have opposite of a positive 20 is a negative 20, right? Positives, negatives. And we have negative 20. We put the line underneath to make the equation. We bring down the x. 20s cancel out. Bring down the equal sign. What's 20 minus 30? Okay, we got 10. Okay, so again, when we're looking at that, same thing. Let's just, real quick, put them back in. We know that 10 is replacing the variable x, so 10 plus 20 equals 30. Is this statement true? Absolutely. Okay, this is the sequence that you're doing when you're adding and subtracting equations. And you can do this, think about how it applies to different things, for money. A lot of people do different sequences when they need to find weight of something, pounds. There's all different things. But when we're finding addition and subtracting, when we're doing the sequence, again, mental math is great, but you always need to work backwards, retrace your steps to think about what is applying for me to show the process. Because I can say, oh, I know 50 minus 10, or 50 plus 10 gives me 60. Yes, you should know that. But again, when you're asked to show... Sorry, guys. We had a little bump in the road. But just to finish off, mental math is always okay to use, and you're going to need that from time to time. But when you're asked to justify and show your answer, this is the process that you're going to have to do. So opposite of negative is a positive, opposite of a positive, negative. Show the equation, do the inverse, write the new problem, follow the procedure and protocols, and you'll see how the flow goes. Because sometimes they'll say, what is the variable of a minus 10 equals 50? But a lot of times they're going to say, can you justify how you solved to show me what the variable is? In that case, this is where the steps come into place. And you're always making sure, because the numbers are always going to expand, the equations are always going to get bigger. So that's why you have to do step by step. We're in the beginning with the adding, subtracting, and we'll move along with addition and subtraction. Okay, so keep up the great work. Again, I'm very proud of everybody. And just keep referring back for all their procedures, skills, standards, and resources. And we'll continue to finish out the year strong. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.